At 4:47 on a Friday afternoon, I had a resignation email open on one screen and my 401k account open on the other. The account showed $24,860. I thought that was my money. It wasn't. In the example plan I was looking at, $18,860 was already mine. The other $6,000 came from employer contributions that were still unvested. If I left that day, I could lose that entire $6,000. If I stayed until the vesting date 31 days later, that employer money would become mine. And no, this was not about picking better funds, maxing out the account, or giving up coffee for 3 years. It was about one date buried inside a retirement plan document. I had already made the opposite mistake once. At an earlier job, I treated the total balance on the dashboard as the amount I would take with me. I picked my last day based on the new job's start date, not the old plan's vesting schedule. After I left, part of the employer money disappeared from the amount I was entitled to keep. That was the moment I stopped asking only, how much is in my 401k? The more useful question became, how much of this balance do I actually own today? And does that number change before I leave? That distinction is the entire reason one extra month can sometimes be worth thousands of dollars. But it is also where people can misunderstand this idea. So the first thing to get clear is what vesting does not affect. The money you put into a 401k from your own paycheck is already yours. Your own elective deferrals are 100% vested. Leaving your employer does not give the company permission to take those contributions back. The moving part is employer money. In a traditional 401k, an employer can make matching or other employer contributions that become yours gradually, or only after you complete a required amount of service. The exact schedule is controlled by the plan. So, imagine my $24,860 balance as 2 stacks. The first stack is $18,860 of money I already own. The second stack is $6,000 of employer contributions sitting behind a small gate labeled vesting. The money is visible in the account. It is invested. It can rise or fall with the market. But visibility is not the same thing as ownership. That is the contradiction. A retirement dashboard can show you one large balance even though your right to keep every dollar in that balance may depend on how long you remain employed. In this example, the plan uses a 3-year cliff for the employer contribution account. Before the required service milestone, the vested percentage is 0. Once the milestone is completed, the vested percentage becomes 100%. So at 35 months, the employer bucket is still not mine. At 36 months, it is. That is why the calendar suddenly matters. But do not copy the 36-month date from this example and paste it onto your own job. Plans can count service differently. Some use a cliff. Some vest gradually. Some vest employer money immediately. Some measure service using hours or plan year rules instead of the simple anniversary logic in this example. The useful lesson is not, always stay one more month. The useful lesson is, find the date when your ownership changes before you choose your last day, and be precise about what leaving means. Sending a resignation email is not automatically the event that changes your vesting. Your plan cares about its own definition of service and the date your employment or credited service ends. In the clean example here, I remain employed through the 36-month milestone, so the plan credits the required service before I leave. In a real plan, you have to verify that assumption instead of guessing from your notice date. That sounds like a tiny administrative detail, but it changes the entire decision. Giving 4 weeks of notice, using paid time off at the end, or agreeing to an earlier separation date can all feel like variations of the same resignation. For vesting purposes, the plan document may treat the relevant service differently. The only number that matters is the one the plan administrator will actually use. And that sounds obvious once you hear it. It did not feel obvious when I was staring at a single account balance and a new job offer, because the new job created a completely different number in my head. The offer paid $9,000 more per year. That is $750 more in gross salary for each month I started sooner. My first calculation was simple. Wait 1 month, keep $6,000. That made the extra month look like a $6,000 decision. But that calculation was too optimistic. Not $6,000. On a gross compensation basis, it was closer to $5,250 before considering any other differences. Why? Because waiting 1 month to protect the employer money also meant delaying the higher salary by 1 month. The $6,000 I could gain from vesting had to be compared with the $750 of additional gross salary I would give up by starting the new job later. $6,000 minus $750 is $5,250. That correction matters because vesting decisions are easy to turn into fake free money. They are not free money. They are trade-offs between two dates. And once you see that, the decision becomes much calmer. You stop thinking, I will lose $6,000 if I quit. You start thinking, what is the net value of staying until the next vesting point compared with leaving now? That is a better question, because it also works when the vesting schedule is not all or nothing. Suppose your employer contribution balance is still $6,000, but your plan uses graded vesting. Maybe your current vested percentage is 40%, and the next service milestone takes you to 60%. The next milestone is not worth the full $6,000. It increases your ownership by 20 percentage points. 20% of $6,000 is $1,200. Now the date has a $1,200 gross value before you compare it with the cost of waiting. That is a very different decision. This is why the big balance on the homepage is almost the least useful number when you are planning to leave a job. You need the employer contribution balance, your current vested percentage, your next vested percentage, and the exact service rule that gets you from one to the other. Then you need one more number: what waiting actually costs you. That cost can include a delayed raise, a lost signing bonus, a month of a better employer match, a benefit change, or something personal that matters more than the retirement math. The retirement account does not know why you want to leave. The spreadsheet does not know either. A toxic manager, a health issue, a family move, or a job that is becoming unsafe can make "just stay another month" terrible advice even when the number on paper is positive. The point is not to let a vesting schedule trap you in a job. The point is to stop leaving money by accident when the timing is flexible. That distinction became real in this example when the new employer changed the offer. A few days after I had worked out the $5,250 net advantage, they added a condition. Start on the original date and receive a $3,000 signing bonus. Delay the start by a month and the bonus disappears. Now the decision changed again. The employer money at risk was still $6,000. The delayed salary still cost $750. But waiting would now also cost a $3,000 signing bonus. So the net advantage of staying to the vesting date fell to $2,250. Still positive in this simplified example, but no longer dramatic. And if that signing bonus had been $7,000 instead of $3,000, the math could easily point the other way. That is the stress test. A useful vesting strategy has to survive contact with the rest of your compensation. If it only works when you pretend the new job has no salary, no bonus, no benefits, no start date pressure, and no personal cost, then it is not a strategy. It is a screenshot. There is another reason this matters more than the $6,000 number suggests. Retirement money is not only a current balance, it is time attached to a balance. If $6,000 remains invested for 20 years and earns a hypothetical 6% per year, it grows to roughly $19,243. That is not a promise of investment returns. Markets do not deliver a fixed 6% every year. The point is simply that forfeiting employer money today can also mean forfeiting the future growth that money might have had. So, a vesting date can affect two timelines at once. There is the next month, when you decide when to quit. And there is the next 20 years, when the money you kept or forfeited is no longer a small line on an old employer's benefits page. This is also why employers use vesting in the first place. A contribution that becomes yours only after time passes is not just compensation. It is compensation with a retention condition attached. The employer can put money into the plan today while giving you a reason to think carefully about leaving before a future service milestone. From the employee side, the psychology is almost perfectly designed to be ignored. Most of us negotiate salary because salary is obvious. We notice a $9,000 raise. We notice a $3,000 signing bonus. We notice whether health insurance starts on day one. But vesting often lives several clicks deeper, behind words like employer contribution, years of vesting service, and vested percentage. The dashboard may keep showing the full account balance, which makes the unvested portion feel psychologically owned long before it is legally yours to keep. That is why losing it can feel like the employer took your savings, even though the plan may have been applying the vesting terms that existed all along. The information was there, the ownership was not. So here is the practical tool I wish I had used before my first job change. Do not start with your resignation date. Start with what I now think of as the exit date calculation. First, separate your own money from employer money. Your own salary deferrals are already vested. Focus on the employer contribution portion that can still change. Second, find your current vested percentage and your next vested percentage. Do not rely only on the big account balance. Look for a vesting section in the summary plan description, your benefits portal, or your plan statement. If the service counting language is unclear, ask the plan administrator or what date and service requirement actually changes your vested percentage. I would make that question painfully specific. Not, am I close to vesting? Ask, what is my vested percentage today? What will it be on my proposed last day? What exact service rule causes that change? If the answer involves hours, ask how many credited hours you currently have. If it involves an anniversary or elapsed time rule, ask which date the plan recognizes. If the account has several employer contribution sources, ask whether they all use the same vesting schedule. That conversation is not exciting, but it can prevent the most frustrating version of this story. Staying longer because you thought a milestone was coming, then learning you had misunderstood how the plan counts service. Third, calculate the amount that becomes newly yours if you reach that date. If you have $6,000 of employer contributions and you move from 0% vested to 100% vested, the amount at stake is $6,000. If you move from 40% to 60%, the amount newly vested is $1,200. Fourth, calculate the cost of waiting. Add up the compensation you would miss by delaying the next job, salary difference, signing bonus, new employer contributions, or anything else that genuinely changes because of the date. Then compare the two numbers. Newly vested employer money on one side, cost of waiting on the other. That is the financial part of the decision. Then make the human decision. If staying another month is worth $2,250 on paper, but the job is damaging your health, your family situation has changed, or the new employer will not move the start date, the spreadsheet does not get the final vote. Clarity is the goal, not obedience to the number. There is also a second case that shows why copying someone else's vesting story can be expensive. Imagine a coworker looking at the same $6,000 employer balance. The account total looks similar. The resignation question looks similar. But the plan terms say the coworker is already 100% vested. For that person, waiting an extra month to protect the $6,000 protects nothing. The money is already theirs. Or imagine the opposite. The plan credits vesting service based on a rule that does not change on the date the employee assumed. Staying until the employment anniversary may not create another year of vesting service at all. Same visible balance. Different plan rule. Different answer. That is why the summary plan description matters more than a viral rule of thumb. It tells you how your actual plan defines contributions, vesting, service, and eligibility for benefits. And when you are close to leaving, one sentence in that document can be worth more than hours of general retirement advice. I would also check the number twice. The first check is before you negotiate the new start date. The second is before you submit the resignation. Not because the law changes in a week, but because the plan balance, employer contribution posting, or service credit on your account may not look exactly the way you assumed. You want the decision tied to the plan's rules, not to a memory of what the dashboard showed last month. And remember, the most important boundary in this entire story. This is not a universal trick where everybody should delay quitting by 30 days. For some workers, there is no unvested employer money. For others, the next vesting step may be months away. For others, one more month may not satisfy the plan's definition of a year of service. And for someone with a much better offer, the cost of waiting can be larger than the vesting value. The useful behavior is much simpler. Before you choose a last day, check whether your last day changes what you own. That is it. At 4:47 on that Friday, the account still showed $24,860. The number had not changed. What changed was my understanding of it. $18,860 was already mine. $6,000 was employer money sitting on the other side of a vesting milestone in the example plan. 31 more days did not make me a better investor. They did not require a better budget. They did not create a magical 401k loophole. They changed one thing. ownership. And once the cost of waiting was included, the decision was not really worth $6,000. It was worth $2,250 in the final stress-tested version of the example. That smaller number was more useful because it was honest. The first time I left a job, I looked at the total balance and assumed I understood what I owned. Now I would look for the vesting date before I ever pick the resignation date, because sometimes the most valuable retirement decision you make all year is not what fund you buy, it is the day you leave.